live here, Brian Curtis live, and we're doing a lead gen and lead conversion podcast. We missed a couple weeks for those of you that have been kind of seeing us live because of schedule conflicts and some technology errors, but we're back and we're going to be talking about the 8 stages of business growth. We're going to continue that conversation, and for those of you that are seeing this up on our screen, we're kind of explain a little bit of the background on the 8 stages of business growth and how we're going to be breaking down and taking a deep dive into stage number 3. The background on this is that businesses have different problems at different stages, and our conviction is that in the real estate industry specifically, you can make a lot of poor decisions thinking that you're actually making the right decision, and it's not necessarily that it's not the right decision. It might just not be the right decision at the right time, given the stage of business that you're in. And as simple as that sounds, if you don't really know what stage that you are at in your business, and you have a specific way of thinking, or you have a specific mindset, and maybe you're trying to do things that are either behind or ahead of the stage that you're in, it can be disastrous. And that could range from spending more money than your budget is allotted to, because you're trying to be like somebody that's ahead of that's different stages ahead of you, or it could be maybe your thinking patterns are still stuck in stage 1, but now you find yourself in stage 3 because you muscled your way there, but you don't have the thinking of a CEO of what it takes to actually run a business now. So it can be a lot of different things that can happen. And so that's why we're taking time to really go through the 8 stages of business growth. And we've come up with a methodology to help kind of optimize your business called the business flywheel. And essentially the core principle of the business flywheel is that at any point of your business, there's one or two constraints in the business that are stopping your business from moving forward. And because we have limited time, limited resources, it's really important to know what those main constraints are, and then hyper focus on those and fix those instead of trying to do too many things at one time, because really you could be doing a whole lot of things and not achieving anything because it's not fixing the main constraint. And so we kind of look at this business flywheel as an opportunity to evaluate your business, to identify what areas you can remove that friction or that constraint to have breakthroughs. And so for those of you that have never tuned into this training before, we break down the stages from 0 to 100K, 100K to 500K, 500K to $1 million, and $1 million to 1.5, 1.5 to 3 million, and then 3 million to 10 million. And then if you're one of the amazing 1%ers, you skyrocket past that into stage 7 and 8, which is an awesome place to be. So Brian, glad to have you here on our podcast, and we're going to kind of dive into stage 2 and 3. And one of the things that we talk about is the difference in like the dollar per hour average in where you're actually investing your time in stage 2 and stage 3. What do you think the biggest difference, starting off with, like, as far as like where you're spending your time, and like what that looks like, maybe what you could get away with in stage 2, but you really got to reevaluate where you're spending your time in stage 3?
Yeah, I think stage 2 is where we begin to create leverage. We start hiring agents and assistants and ISAs and those type of people. We start to hire those people, and it's an interesting thing. So I'm just want to cover real quick some of those things that came up for me. I can tell you this: when I hired my first person, I was scared. Just being honest, transparent, but I wasn't scared that I was going to fail. I was scared that at some point in time I might not be able to pay her. And it was a limiting belief. And the truth of the matter was, once she got me on my team and she was the right hire, it was easy to pay her because freed up so much of my time. So
Yeah.
that's leaning to where I'm going. So, trust equals leverage is one of my favorite sayings. You have to trust or you will not be able to build leverage. So many people, I hear agents, I'm sure you do as well, Isaiah. I hear people in all walks of the world say, no one's going to do it as well as me. Okay. And that may or may not be true, but let's just assume it is true. And there's only so much you to go around. So what happens is people, when they go from stage 1 to stage 2, a lot of people just work harder, right? Which I respect. I love the heck out of people who are going to work hard, and that's great. But that caps out pretty quick. Like when you hit 80 hours a week, you're not going to double it to 160.
Right.
It just there's not enough hours left in the day. So the only way to grow is to start to delegate, and we start at that at level 2, but level 3, it has to become a focus. It has to become a focus of who can I get to do the thing that's not paying me well enough? Because here's the beauty of what we do. I go on listing appointments, I go on buyer appointments, I go on recruiting appointments. Those are very high dollar producing activities. Most agents spend 80% of their time doing the non-dollar productive activities because they're not willing to delegate. They're not willing to accept that somebody else can do it, at least, as John Maxwell says, at least 80% as well as you can. You have to let them do it. And that's where that mindset comes in. As soon as you start to get that, all of a sudden, everything can expand for you. I had a coaching client the other day ask me, hey, Brian, how does your team do this? And when they were doing, they were very much in the details of it. And I had to say, I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because I've delegated so much of that out that I know that the cake is made, but I don't know what ingredients go in it anymore. And that's okay. So it's the learning to trust and really turn things over. And the default question that I ask here is, what can I get off my plate that somebody else can do?
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. We have some really powerhouse agents and the Renegade / Growth CEO Mastermind group that we run. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is to see how they're processing becoming an agent, like a powerhouse agent, to transitioning to that CEO mindset. And such a large part of it is trust and delegation. And it's interesting to see how many people, if they don't get over that, they're in the same place year after year. Like, because there's, to your point, there's only so much productivity that they can handle themselves without compromising something else.
Yep.
And I think one of the most powerful question frameworks I've ever been taught by Tony Robbins was, you don't want to ask a question and then leave it there. You want to ask a question, but then make sure that you have a without at the end of it. So in other words, how do I build a 7-figure business without compromising the time with my family and whatever else that you want to accomplish? Or how do I build a business without compromising my core values? Or and I think that if you ask the without, it helps make sure that whatever your solutions you're coming up with, that you can back into the potential problem in the future. So, like, for example, if you're worried about delegation because customer service issues, or because of whatever that reason, that worry, that concern, then just ask the question, how do I hire somebody without it hurting my client experience?
Mm-hmm.
And you start thinking of solutions to prevent the issues that could come with the client experience, like putting good process in place, right? Training. But the alternative sucks. The alternative means, like, you stay the same every year. So, like, one of the things that my mentor taught me is, like, what devil do you want to live with? Because there's going to always be a devil there. Like, not in the sense of a religious standpoint, but in the sense of, like, there's always going to be a problem there, right? What problem do you want to live with? Like, I would rather live with a problem that's going to lead me to an opportunity for me to grow my personal and career and my future, than problems that I'm going to live with every day staying the same. Either way, I'm going to deal with a problem. So, I don't know any thoughts on that as far as delegation, or like, I just think for me, it helped me frame it out in my mind. It's like, I'm going to have problems either way.
Yeah. And here's the thing. One of the things that I would say is write down the things that you're great at, write down the things that you're acceptable at, and write down the hell no things. And I mean, hell no. There are things like full disclosure, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I never door knocked. Door knock was a hell no for me. I'd rather spend 3 hours on the phone than go door knock a neighborhood.
That's how I was too. I did it for a very short period of time, and then I realized that for me personally, the phone was much of a better use of time. So it became a hell no for me too. I was like,
right. So once you get those hell no's, like at this point in time, you can actually hell no lead generation. And here's what I mean by that, because when you're doing this, you can hire somebody to do that. There's good and bad things about that. You still have to manage and lead and train and all the things that come with it. But my point is, when you get to stage 3, you get to make choices. But I love what you were talking about with questions. Both of us are big Tony fans. And Tony says the quality of my life is determined by the quality of the questions I ask. Here's the problem that I see so many people do. They limit themselves. They put them in the box by the question that they ask, because again, back to Tony, whatever you ask yourself, you'll get an answer.
Yeah.
So why does real estate suck? You'll get an answer. Why is real estate awesome? You'll get an answer. And both of those will be true for you, by the way. It's just, which one am I going to focus on? So asking that question is, how do I get what I want? Or how do I get to the next level? Who do I need to hire? What do I need to delegate? It's all about those questions, and then literally following your gut from that. Or I would also suggest that this is why we have this, right? So this is what I did. I followed my gut, and my gut's not perfect. So occasionally I did some dumb stuff. I love that Isaiah developed this, and I was able to participate in tweaking and giving some ideas here. What I love about this, though, is a model to follow. Is it the absolute best model? I'm not sure, but I know it's a great model, and I know if you follow it, it'll be extremely successful. And too many people are, as agents, we weren't trained as business people, so we're trying to go from a person who's great with people, loves to talk, great salesperson, to business owner. And then ultimately we have to switch our mentality when we get there. So it's really about asking the questions. And I want to add one other thing. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see people when they get to this stage. I want X, and then there's a gigantic but that comes with it. But I won't do this, I won't do this, I won't do this, and I won't do this. Don't restrict yourself. Find out what your goal is, and then figure out how to get to the goal. You can set boundaries. I'm not saying, for example, for me, a boundary would, I'm not going to work 100 hours a week anymore. So it doesn't have to be that. But I hear people all the time say, I want to be successful. I want to have freedom. I want to have all these things, but I don't want to have a single employee. Maybe you're smarter than me and figure out how to do that, but I don't know how to do that. Or I don't want a team. Okay. And that's great. You don't want a team, and understand if you don't have people on your team, whether that's staff or whether that's agents, you can't create a lot of leverage. So focus on what your goal is.
Why do you think people don't want to? What are some of the false beliefs about people wanting a team? What do you think? Where do you think that comes from? Because
I think it's all about.
Uncle,
Yeah.
So my uncle, I've talked to him about this. He's been a solo entrepreneur his whole life, and he complains about it all the time, but yet at the same breath, he won't, he's a surveyor, really well-known surveyor in the area, but at the same time, he won't hire. It's like he's complaining about how he's tired and he's exhausted and he doesn't have enough time in the day, but yet he won't hire because he says, well, I'll share what he said at the end, but like, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay. Like where does that dynamic come from? So like,
yeah, obviously I don't know your uncle personally. That being said, what I hear is probably a limiting belief that someone else won't do it as well as me. I'll lose business. I'll lose control. Those are some of the things you hear over and over again. And by the way, BS. Okay. I mean, most agents that I know are not as nearly as good as they think they are anyway. And I'm not trying to insult you guys. I included myself in that. I made a lot of mistakes as a real estate agent and was still very successful. I could go back and do better today because, after 25 years, you get to learn a couple of things. And the biggest thing I learned, though, is that I have to let go. I have to be willing for people to make mistakes and be okay with that. So I hear all the time, I don't want to manage people. Great. Don't lead them. Create systems to manage them, and then you lead them. Leadership is
I was
about
gonna say
motivation and understanding.
that's what I think it is. I think it's deeper where they don't either wanna do the work of managing them or they're afraid of being, they're afraid that they're not good enough.
Oh yeah,
I think
absolutely.
if I was to take a stab at it, if there was some sort of survey, I think that for a large group of people, they're afraid that they're either their structure, their systems, them as a person, they're afraid they're not good enough or worthy deep down to bring on a team member and keep good talent. I think that's a big one, in my opinion.
Right. So if that's your belief, congratulations. First of all, congratulations for identifying your belief, right?
Right.
Most people are held back by their limiting beliefs, not because they're limiting beliefs, because they're not even aware that they have them consciously. Like if I walked up to 100 people and go 100 real estate agent and say, "Are you good enough?" They will all say yes. And about 95% of them have a belief that they're not. So you have to understand that, first of all, you have to identify those limiting beliefs and then figure out ways to work around them, ways
Right.
to, be better. So, for example, I coach a team in Atlanta because the team leader doesn't like to get on there and coach. So I
Right.
coach him. So I literally get on. So this person solved her problem, not
I
because
love it.
not by just doing what she didn't want to do. She hired me to do it. And
I love it.
so you've got to
She
be
found a way to
willing
make
to
it work.
leverage. And yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you there.
Oh no, she found a way to make it work. She
Yeah,
found a way to make it work around
100%.
her. Yeah, that's
And,
huge.
and, and it really starts here. And this is where I think most people are missing it. They don't have a real goal.
Right.
And so you've got to, especially, I mean, you should have a goal at level one. Don't get me wrong. But by the time you get to stage three, level three, or however you want to refer to that, you better have a goal because, first of all, now I got to deal with people. I love people. They're amazing and they're horrible. I mean, they're our biggest strength and our greatest weakness. They always will be. And even as AI starts to take over the world, it still comes down. We're still in a people business, thank God, or otherwise we don't need us. But
Yep.
it's always going to come down to being willing to lead people. And I hear people all the time say, "I don't want this." And so the question I would ask is, are you willing to continue to do all the things that you want to do all by yourself, or are you willing to accept some of the leadership and management? And again, one of the great things about companies like yours, Isaiah, is we can build the process for you. There's literally rip off and duplicate the process that we've got here, so you'll have a great process in place, and then all you have to do is lead. You don't have to manage.
Yeah, we've seen some awesome stories on that where people have come in and they have either had a real small team or no team at all. One is Justine Hooper, who we hope to have on our podcast in the future.
Yeah, I'm excited
And
about
she
that.
started with us and she had zero. It was her, and she had split off from a team member, and she was starting her own independent brokerage. And I think for her, she was past the idea of some positions. I felt like it was easier for her to hire, and others she was more nervous about hiring
Yep.
to give up certain things. And I think that's one benefit about being part of a program that has systems in place that you can kind of plug and play, or at least plug, alter, and play, to make it work towards what you're trying to accomplish. Is because, for me, if I have a system or a process that I can look at and say, oh, okay, I see the pathway here. I can see how to implement this. I question things a lot less and I move a lot quicker just by having that framework. And, I think that's, if I was to brag about our coaching, I think that's one of the things that we do a really good job is we have a really good framework in place for almost everything for people to kind of step in.
Yes.
And it's not theoretical stuff. It's stuff that we use every single day. So.
Yeah, I love that you said framework. And here's what I mean by that. Too many people go, "Well, I don't want to be exactly like Isaiah. I don't want to be exactly like Brian." Great. We're not asking you to. We're just giving you the framework that I'm not going to speak for Isaiah, but I feel confident he'll probably say the same thing. The framework I wished I would have had. Because I didn't have a framework. I made it all up. I tell some of my coaching clients, and it's not as true today as it was 5 years ago, but I used to tell people as a joke, 90% of my coaching is me telling you the mistakes I made so you can make different choices. And there was some truth to that. It was an exaggeration, but I didn't know a lot of things. Funny story. I started a real estate brokerage as the principal broker having never sold a piece of residential real estate. That was dumb.
Right.
But why I was proud of that for years, that I would make a different choice today. But here's the thing, and this is the thing, if you don't hear anything else from this podcast today, is you have to take action. The people who are most successful in life are not the ones who are brilliant. Matter of fact, IQ has zero correlation to success. But it's the people who say, you know what, I'm going to do this. Yes, there's some risk, but I'm going to go all in. As Tony Robbins says, we're going to take the island and burn the bridge, right? And we're going to move forward. We're going to take that action. Hiring my first assistant, that felt like burning the bridge. Holy crap, here we go. Hiring my first buyer's agent, that was the same thing. All these things take a little bit of courage, and you know what? There's problems that will come with them, but the upside of it is so beneficial for me, and it may not be for you, but it's so beneficial to not have to do all the things that I didn't love to do anymore. And you know, after I think I started a team after 8 years in the business, 9 years in the business, and I was a little burnt out on some of those stuff. But so I changed the things that I did, and I still sold a bunch of real estate, but I changed it and gave myself a break and created leverage.
Yeah, well, there's a quote that I read once, kind of transitioning into the next level skill sets. Is the quote that I read is, behind every great business is great people. And if you look at that, what is the, you know, what do we got to, you know, where does finding great talent fall into this? You know, like at what level of importance when it comes to time blocking, time management, you know, like, you know, all the experience, all the different, you know, opportunities for growth, the problems, you know, where does finding top talent, you know, fall as far as priority goes?
You know, for me, it's literally my number one priority at this stage. At stage 3, it's probably a high priority, not my number one priority, but it's very, very high. Because here's the thing, I said this earlier, people are your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. That's it, plain and simple. You can't yet, who knows, maybe 5 years from now, you can run everything with AI, but we can't yet. So I still need people, and people are where things matter. And I find too many people focus on someone who has been trained versus someone who's talented. My first hire, she couldn't spell real estate. She's still with me. She's great at what she does. She didn't know anything about real estate, but she was talented. She answered the interview questions. She made sense in what she did. So I hired talent. I didn't hire experience. And I think that's a big mistake. Ideally, would I like experience and talent? Absolutely. That's amazing. But talent is far more important than experience, because I can't train talent. I can train, but I can train someone who doesn't have the experience yet.
Yeah, I want to maybe end off this with this here for today. We're talking about stage 3. When you were back into, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, and I'm going to think of something for myself too while you're talking, so I'm giving myself a little bit of an advantage here with this question. But if you were back at stage 3, what would you have done differently, knowing what you know now, being at stage 6?
I would have hired more strategically is the answer. So I was in a mode where it was hire anybody and everybody who has a pulse, and we'll deal with the fallout of that. So I want to tell people that there's a line, right? You go from where I was at, like, you want to be on my team? Sure, come on. And that was where I was at. I went from there. Where I would go back to is, you want to interview for my team? Absolutely. And so I would set up standards. What I didn't do, we didn't have our values written out at that point in time. We didn't have our mission. We didn't have our vision. And so how did I know if somebody was good or not? Well, if they closed deals, they were good. And that's a mistake, because there are people, and I'm sure you can attest to this as well, to this. There are people who were good producers who cost me money, because they were a good producer, but in essence, they they destroyed our culture along the way, or I let them destroy our culture along the way. They took advantage. They worked the system for them, not for everybody. Team player is a huge one of my values. We all have to get along. We all have to play together. And
Right.
even though somebody's closing, well over the minimum expectation, that person can still cost you money. And I think that's something that people just look at. And it's real easy to look at, especially when the market gets tight. When the market gets tight, it's hard to say, I want to hire culture over production. And short-term production is more important. Long-term culture is more important.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think for me, one of the biggest things that I would have done different is kept the core values in front. So I had them, but they were tucked away.
Yeah.
Like I went through the exercise, but I never, and like the same thing happened when I went through from stage 3 to stage 4, and then didn't really started feeling it in stage 4, but then once got into stage 5, really started feeling it, where there became a lot of culture, issues where your top producers, I had one top producer, I mean, the most dynamic guy, but very extremely negative, and to the point where he would turn a lot of other really good producers off. And if I would have been living, or even had conversations with him about our core values, even just talk to him about it, right, or encourage management to talk to him about it, it's probably ended up being a multi-million-dollar mistake one way or another, whatever way you look at it. And so that's what I would have done different, is really, kind of, I think and then also I think firing a little quicker that sounds maybe harsh if you don't know that, if you're listening to this not in its context, but oftentimes when you care about people, you want to hope for the best, so you keep giving people second, third, and fourth chances, right? And when people see that, and you claim that you have a set of core values, or you have a set of standards, right? You're claiming that we have standards, we have core values, but then they see in real time your actions don't match your words. What does that do? And also too for the benefit of the person, if the person is not performing in the environment, in the framework that you have built, that you see is going to be beneficial for you, the other people around you, for your community, and for your family, and if they're not able to perform that environment, you're not doing them any favors.
No. 100%. If they're not striving in your environment, you thought they were a good person and a good hire, then maybe they just don't fit. Maybe they need to go someplace else and thrive. Leave room for somebody else. Stop pouring into people who don't want you to pour into them. That's one of the biggest mistakes I've made at every level. It's pouring into people who don't want to be poured into. You can't want it more than they do, and you can't do it for them. And all you can do is lead. All you can do is get people to follow you to that. But ultimately, I'm not going to go show every house. I'm not going on every listing appointment. It doesn't work. I'm not going to make all the lead generation calls. I don't have that kind of time. We don't. So yeah, it's okay if somebody doesn't fit. And I think that you should set that up when you hire somebody. We do a 90-day check-in. Hey, 90 days. Do you like me still? Do I like you still? Not quite that simplistic, but at the end of the day, is this working for you? Is this working for me? And it's powerful, because you're right. If you don't enforce standards, if you don't have boundaries, if you don't have values, you can't apply them to one person and not the other. And they go, what the hell? That's bad leadership.
Yeah. I looking forward to having more leadership conversations once we get into stage 3 and stage 4. So next week, what we're going to do on the podcast, we'll do a quick recap on stage 3 and start talking about what it means to build out systems in stage 4, what leadership looks like in stage 4. There's a lot of really, really important things to talk about in stage 4. So we hope you enjoyed this week's podcast, another episode of Lead Gen and Lead Conversion Mastery. Brian, thanks for your dialogue as always. And if you would help us, share the message of what we're talking about and how we're trying to help as many people use strategies and frameworks to build a 7-figure business. We appreciate you sharing this podcast with other people to get it out there. And with that, I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day. Bye, everybody.